Okay, Unit 1.3, Part 3. Now we're going to talk about the effects. So we said we're always going to focus on the causes, the effects, the turning points, key dates. And so now we're turning to Part 3. The political battle over Lutheranism in Germany. So now that we set the stage for Luther and the divide within the church, we're going to talk about this political battle then that's going to take place due to this new religion because of the conflict between Lutherans and Catholics in Germany. But you have to remember Germany's not a state yet. So what we're really talking about is the Holy Roman Empire, which is 300 separate entities, duchies, counties, individual princes. And so we have all of these individual princes, some who are supporting Luther that we saw he's being protected by, and as we're going to talk about in a little bit, not only religiously motivated, but motivated by secular power as the reasoning for following Luther. So we're going to see that many of these independent German states in the north are going to turn to Lutheranism. That's the area in the red here on the map. And just to know, not to be cynical about it, but they're not just religiously motivated. It's not like, oh, what's the best religion for me? Most of them were politically motivated because they can now escape the authority of the Catholic Church, which that authority then would go to them and confiscate the church lands for the state's benefit, all of the money. Remember how wealthy the church was, and wrap it up into their own benefit for their own state. We're going to get to this more when we talk about the new monarchies in Unit 2, but the development of monarchical power over church power. The southern part of Germany largely is going to remain Catholic. There's a pretty easy geographical explanation for this. It's closer to Rome. It's easier to be controlled from Rome. Because they're in the south and closer to the Roman Church. And also Luther had begged the princes for help and had been in the north. And so we'll see a lot of the northern states seeing the benefit of their freedom from the church and being further away from that control to allow them to take power. We'll also see Denmark and Sweden up there in red are going to become Lutheran states as well. And this is where we get Lutherans in the United States. We'll see migration to the United States from northern Germany and Denmark and Sweden, and that will bring Lutheranism to the United States. But at this point, Lutheranism is not going to spread much beyond northern Germany and Scandinavia. This will be unlike Calvinism, which we're going to talk about in class, that spread throughout Western Europe and parts of the New World right away. So Charles V, our Holy Roman Emperor, who we're going to talk more about with the new monarchies, is going to have a goal to stop Protestantism and preserve the hegemony of Catholicism, or the total control of Catholicism. He has some pretty substantial family ties that make him feel responsible to do this. He is a Habsburg and the son of Joanna of Castile in Spain, so a very Catholic, of course, nation. But Joanna of Castile is the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, which we're going to definitely talk about in Unit 2 with new monarchies. And we touched on a little bit with the Inquisition, but if you remember the Inquisition, they're very Catholic. Spain remaining very Catholic when Protestantism comes along because of the use of things such as the Inquisition, like, we will kill you if you're not Catholic. And so he is the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella, and he feels a great responsibility to Catholicism and trying to maintain religious unity in Europe. And he will ally with the Pope in trying to stamp out this heresy of Lutheranism. However, Charles, if you read in your book, spoiler alert, if not, is not going to be successful because he's going to be preoccupied or distracted with the Turkish threat in Hungary and his dynastic struggle with Francis I of France. We're going to talk here in a little bit about how France is always going to have a political agenda to try to keep Germany not unified in order, because they're afraid of them, and we'll talk about maybe that was an actually good position to take, not allowing Germany to unify. Of course, they won't unify until 1871, but he's going to be distracted and not able to strangle Lutheranism because of this distraction. However, he is the most powerful man, probably the most powerful man in 16th century Europe. As we're going to see in a slide here in just a second, of his territories, but having the claim on his Spanish side of the family in the New World that we're going to talk about in next unit. And so you can see here all of the holdings of Charles V in the Holy Roman Empire. And this will take him between 1521 and 1530 away from the Holy Roman Empire. He'll spend a lot of time in Italy as he's allied with the Pope and dealing with his biggest problem that the Muslims were coming, which we've talked about before. So he probably could have stamped out Protestantism, but he couldn't focus his military solely on Germany at the time Protestantism was spreading vigorously. And so this is his number one hangup in not being able to prevent the Protestant spread. And so another effect of Protestantism is going to take place in what is known as the Peasants' War or German Peasants' Revolt, especially the most common, the Swabian Peasant Uprising. And so preachers all over Germany have been reading Luther. He wrote a lot, as you can tell. Most of your primary source packets have been Luther in this unit so far. And so these German preachers are preaching Luther's words. And Luther's words have a lot to do with spiritual freedom. So there's this element of freedom that is going to be preached to then these common people in their own language, and it's going to create this frenzy. They're going to think, oh, Luther understands us. The church, the church was being oppressive, and we're oppressed by the princes and serfdom and tithes and all of these practices of feudalism that are holding us down, hunting rights, etc. And so many of these peasants are going to be inspired by the preachings of the clergy in their area who are preaching Luther. And they're going to turn that against what they feel is their oppression, which are the princes and kings. And this is going to lead to rebellion. And one of the most prominent passages that is going to lead to this rebellion came from Luther in his writing on Christian liberty. And in this, he's going to say, a Christian man is the most free, Lord of all, subject to none. And this phrase is going to be embraced by the peasants because they're going to say, hey, I'm a Christian man. I should be free. I shouldn't be oppressed. I shouldn't be under these ties of serfdom. But what Luther actually meant was to be spiritually free. And this is going to cause a problem. This is going to cause a pickle for Luther, as you'd say, because although he's preaching all of this freedom and the peasants are going to embrace it, the princes have embraced Lutheranism as well, and now the peasants have, but the peasants are rebelling against their princes or kings. And so Luther is going to have to make a decision, and ironically, Luther's views on the peasant movement are going to be pretty much conservative because he did not really mean that you shouldn't be subject to a prince, but that you shouldn't be subject to anyone other than God in the Bible. And so Luther's going to have to make a choice, but he needs the prince's support more, even though he's stuck in the middle because he's got the Holy Roman Emperor on his tail. Remember, he's been charged with heresy, and the peasants aren't going to be able to protect him. And so he takes a verse from Romans, which is one of his favorite books of the Bible, and he's going to say, let every man be subject to the higher power. The powers that be are put there by God. And so he is going to use this turn of phrase to say, those who are in power because God allows them to be, and you can't rebel politically. And so while Luther advocated religious reform, since God's realm was not a worldly one, he believed that people should obey their political authorities. Luther may have, however, sympathized with some of the complaints of the peasants, but he's going to be disgusted with the violence of the peasant movement and admonish the German princes to violently stamp out the revolt. And so he's going to take the prince's side. And he is going to write against the murdering, thieving hordes, and that is directly aimed at the peasants. He dislikes the amount of violence that they're using, and he tells the princes, I am on your side, stamp them out. And we're going to see as million as 100,000 peasants died during the uprising as the princes used the advice that Luther gave them. And both Catholic and Lutheran forces will take part in squashing the revolt. So a significant amount of deaths. So while Luther was a revolutionary religiously, he was very conservative politically and socially, economically, etc. So if you had an FRQ that asked you to evaluate whether Luther was a revolutionary, you definitely definitely want to take into consideration his beliefs when it came to the peasant uprising, and that's something the AP exam likes to try to pull over on you quite a bit. And so while we have the peasant revolts put down by the princes, and Luther taking his stand and staying with the princes, we are going to have the princes still facing a problem because remember, Charles V is trying to stamp out Protestantism. And so we're going to see that in northern Germany, we're going to have an alliance formed called the League of Schmalkalden in 1531, and that's in your terms to know for spelling. So what's going to happen is the newly Protestant Lutheran princes are going to form this alliance to defend themselves against Charles V's drive to re-Catholicize Germany. The irony of this situation, however, is that Francis I of France, a Valois king, will ally with the League despite being Catholic. What you have to remember here is the irony lies in that they're Catholic fighting against Charles V, who's Catholic, but they're French Catholic. So if you remember the break in the church, also that Francis stance is that they're worried about German political power. So if all of these princes united under all these princes united, so if they don't step in, that political power might be so great, and France would find themselves very surrounded and feeling very trapped in. And so this is a political stance that's going to continue for centuries with France, trying to keep Germany divided. And it's going to work, and it might have been a reasonable idea, not so out there, because Germany won't be united until 1871, and right after that, what do we have? 1914, which is Germany invading France, World War I, and then 1939, World War II with Germany invading France. So they might not have been so off the mark about not wanting the Germans to unite politically or religiously. And so here you can see why the French probably felt a little trapped in all of the blue or the holdings of the Habsburg Empire, so they're feeling very surrounded. But the result of this alliance of France with the League of Schmalkalden is going to end up being the Habsburg and Valois War. So Charles V is the Habsburg, Valois or the French kings, and this will be 5 wars between 1521 and 1555 between France and the Habsburgs. France will try to keep Germany divided. Although France was also Catholic, this conflict will play an important role in retarding the unification of the German states, preventing that from happening until 1871. And Catholic unity in Germany will never again occur due to these wars. Charles V will actually finally be victorious over the League in 1547. But it's too late. By that time, Lutheranism had spread and taken hold in much of Central Europe, and by the 1550s, Charles is going to be forced to give up on restoring Catholicism in all the German states in the empire. He's just too distracted by other things, and the alliance doesn't help, and he has his troops spread out too far, and so he will be unsuccessful in his goal of stopping Protestantism. But this is going to bring us to another key date. So we had 1517 with the 95 Theses. Now we're going to have 1555 with the Peace of Augsburg. Okay, so you should remember the Confessions of Augsburg as we just talked about it, laying forth the Lutheran faith, but now we're going to have the Peace of Augsburg. So Charles V is going to realize that he can't win over the Protestants or over Protestantism, and is going to make some peace, and it will temporarily end the struggle in Germany over Lutheranism. The provisions of this peace treaty are that the princes in Germany could choose either Protestantism or Catholicism. But this is very important to note, don't get confused here. This is not freedom of religion for anyone, for the common people. It's only freedom of religion for the princes. Quis regio, uis religio. Who's the region? His the religion is the Latin phrase, so it's the prince of the region gets to choose the religion. But Protestants living, so the normal people living in Catholic states, would be allowed to move to Protestant states, and the same was true of Catholics living in Protestant states. So you could move to a prince who was running his principality or his nation under the religion that you followed. This is going to result in permanent religious division of Germany and essentially reaffirm the independence of many German states. So this is totally going to stunt nationalism that we're going to see is rising in other nations such as England and France and Spain. They're all unified under one religion, Catholicism. And so this is really going to stunt Germany's nationalism and will not allow Germany to unify as a state until 1871, as we mentioned earlier. Okay, so now that we've talked about some effects of Lutheranism and some political struggles that resulted from that, and added one more key date of 1555 and the Peace of Augsburg, we are going to pick up in class with the spread of Protestantism and other Protestant sects that are going to come out of this push or divide now within the Catholic Church. And so we'll pick up with 1.3, part 4 in class, and then continue through the English Reformation. So make sure that you're in your reading. You should be page 95 to 117 right now, and then you'll pick up with page 118 as your homework on Friday. See you on Wednesday.